Breaking news into SportsCenter basketball Hall of Famer Bill Walton has died. The NBA announced that he had a prolonged battle with cancer and was surrounded by his family. Walton was a dominant center at UCLA, winning 2 titles, being named Player of the Year 3 times. He went on to win 2 championships in the NBA with the Trailblazers in 1977, with the Celtics in 1986. Beyond basketball, Walton was a truly unique individual. His love of the Grateful Dead, well known, and his big smile, always a welcome addition to our ESPN family. Bill Walton was 71.
You're truly a titan in the world of basketball as we bring in our Jay Bilas. And Jay, Michelle kind of alluded to it a second ago. I mean, dominant basketball player in and of itself, but such a huge personality. Your reaction to Bill Walton passing away?
Well, Matt, I'm heartbroken. I grew up in Southern California and grew up with Bill Walton as an idol of mine. And we had a chance to work with him, just a genuine, beautiful person that always asked about you. And as much as he could talk endlessly and captivate everyone around the table with experiences from his life, that's not what he was about. He was about asking you about yours, and he was genuinely interested. One of the most generous souls I've ever been around, incredibly intelligent, well-read. I think a lot of people later in his career were captivated by his showmanship, but and sometimes that overshadowed, I think, especially for the younger players that he covered, the fact that he may have been the greatest college basketball player of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He was an all-time great pro as well. Injuries certainly affected that, but there was no doubt that it was Bill Walton and as far as I'm concerned, Bill Walton and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the 2 best centers that I've ever seen play. But more than that, and I think eclipsing that, he was an absolutely magnificent, beautiful person that you love to be around at all times, and a fabulous colleague that was more interested in his colleague's success than in his own. And as you know, that's truly unique in this business.
Yeah, Jay, I want to go back to something you said about him growing up as your idol in Southern California. What did, because he was a part of those John Wooden teams at UCLA, some of the greatest basketball to ever be played. What did Bill Walton mean to that area of the country, perhaps for those that were out here in the Northeast and may not have been paying attention to his collegiate career?
In the early 1970s, there were many that were not only observers but embedded in the game that would tell you that Bill Walton was the best player to ever play college basketball. He was a big-time scorer. He had 44 points in the title game, NCAA title game against Memphis State. He was 21 of 22 from the field in that game. Just a legendary performance. But that wasn't unique. I mean, he was dominant in almost every game he played. A voracious rebounder and perhaps the finest passing center, not only of his generation but of all time. Outlet passing, you name it. He was a complete basketball player that could run, super athletic, was all about team, and he was the catalyst of that 88-game winning streak that UCLA had over that time period. There was certainly no better player while he was in school, and I'll say it again. I think it was he and Lou Alcindor, later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as the greatest college basketball players of all time in my book.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. Look, he was the voice of Pac-12 basketball. All of us here at ESPN and college basketball fans around the country, they knew Bill Walton to be second to none in terms of entertaining while calling a college basketball game. And there might be people who think that was a show. Take us behind the curtain with Bill Walton and the person and what he was like behind the scenes.
Just a very sweet man that was very genuine. Always fun, and I mean that. He was always interested in you. So he wasn't the type that was going to sit down and talk about himself. He was going to draw you out and find out something about you and your family. Never failed. I was just talking with a colleague of mine and great friend. And I think he encapsulated it really well. He said there wasn't a time that he spoke to Bill Walton that Bill didn't ask and was interested in his family. And how is your family doing? Knowing everybody by name. When we worked together, whether it was Maui or doing a Pac-12 game together, he was endlessly interested in you. And he was just so much fun to be around. And I do think, look, he had an element of showmanship, especially later on in his career, that he embraced. But it wasn't necessarily him. It was just part of the show. But what was him was he put others first all the time. And I don't think I'm talking out of school in telling this, but Mike Breen took his father out to visit Bill one time. And Bill went so far out of his way to spend the day with Mike's father. And Mike told me, he goes, I'll never forget that, how generous he was to my dad.
What's your personal and most memorable Bill Walton story?
Well, I'm having a hard time keeping it together talking to you, Matt.
Yeah, understood.
You know, one is funny. He loved to call me Jake to intentionally get my name wrong, and I loved it. And maybe the funniest thing that he said on the air, Dave Pash and Bill and I were doing a Pac-12 game at Arizona. It was Colorado versus Arizona. And he went on some long soliloquy after talking about saguaro cactus and the mystical powers of the desert. He had mentioned the name of the former head coach of Kansas, Ted Owens, who's just another just magnificent person. He's in his 90s now, lives in Oklahoma. And then he says, Jake, you don't even know who Ted Owens is. I said, well, of course I do, Bill. Ted Owens recruited me. And he said, for what? And I fell on the floor laughing. I couldn't stand it. It was so good.
What was he like? I mean, those of us at ESPN, we're calling games, we're out on the road. I mean, you're with the people you're calling games with for days at a time, sometimes more than your family, and it becomes your on-the-road family. And there's so many conversations and so many memories. You had the treat of going to dinner with Bill Walton on the road. What was this guy like when you guys were out at crew dinners, in coaches' meetings, and just getting ready for a broadcast in general?
You know, that's a great question, Matt. It's really interesting. He was never the center of attention, even though everybody around him wanted him to be. He was always one of the group, but if he were going to be the center of attention, he would act to put the spotlight on someone else in the group. So he would be a ringleader of starting a conversation, but to draw out others and find out more about others, get others talking about themselves or their families. And he was incredibly intelligent and well-read and endlessly interesting. But if you ever, like before a game or an appearance, if I wanted to talk about, hey, Bill, what do you want to do on the air? He would always say, save it for the air. Save it for the air. And he'd say, Jake, you can say anything to me or about me. He was just the best. And there's truly never been anyone like him in the game. I've never met anyone like him. And I will be eternally grateful that I got to know him and call him a friend.
And I know that this last question will be close to impossible to answer as best you can. In one word to you, sum up Bill Walton.
One word. I would say authentic. There's only one. And I think you mentioned the name Bill Walton to anyone who knew him, and there will be an immediate smile, if not a laugh, about the kind of person he was and how meaningful he was to all of us and will remain to be. It's funny. We had a T-shirt made up this last year it was almost a Grateful Dead looking caricature of Bill, and I wore it during the Maui Invitational. I don't think I've had any inquiry as often as I did. Where can I get a Walton T-shirt? Everybody loved him, and I was chief among them. I love Bill Walton, and I'll always have him in a very special place in my heart.
Did he ever dive in? You bring up the Grateful Dead, and everybody knows that about him. Did you ever dive into that with him, how that started, where it came from, and why it was such a passionate love of his?
I mean, he went to Dead shows from the time that he was in college, I believe, and was a passionate fan of the Grateful Dead. And he said it on broadcast. He would use Grateful Dead lines. But a number of my high school friends are Deadheads and still go to the Dead shows. And every time they would see him, he'd remember him. They'd take photos together. They'd bag on me. He'd say, "How's Jake?" And but he's, it was a big part of his life: music, literature, poetry, you name it. He led a very rich life away from basketball. Basketball was how he was best known, but he was far more than a truly great Hall of Fame basketball player. He was a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame human being.
That goes back to your one word to describe him: authentic, one of a kind. Bill Walton, Jay Bilas, thank you so much for perspective on your friendship and your relationship with him. A tough day for the world of basketball, and a tough day for us here at ESPN. Bill Walton has passed away at age 71 with his battle with cancer, and our thanks to Jay Bilas for spending some time with us. And you look at him and you talk about the impact he's had just in basketball in general. I grew up in the Pac-10, the now Pac-12, the now defunct Pac-12.
Right.
And every time I think of Bill Walton, I hear Conference of Champions, Conference of Champions. Of course, his time there at UCLA, his son Luke would go and play well at Arizona. To me, he symbolized the Pac-12, the conference I grew up with.
I get to do a little bit of everything here at ESPN, and on one of the Warriors playoff runs not too long ago, Bill Walton was there, and you couldn't miss him, right? You couldn't miss him because of the physical stature, because of his personality. There was a warmth, I think, that emanated from him that you could feel from sort of across the room. And you could tell that the game had done a number on him, too.
Yeah.
He must have been in physical agony from the injuries, the surgeries that he had, but you wouldn't know it from his personality. He was a guy, you could tell he believed that he thought he was the luckiest guy in the world.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Bill Walton is we remember his life here today on SportsCenter. He was one of those humans. As Jay Bilas, he was larger than life. He was a well-known name in the NBA because of his career, but certainly with college basketball. But he was one of those people that was such a superstar, but he was so approachable. How many times can you say that about someone with his stature physically and then in the world of media and sport? He's a guy that the college kids, and they tend to be fearless anyway, they just want to go up and talk to him. And I think that says a lot about what Jay Bilas said about authenticity, that basketball was how he was known, but anyone could go up and talk to him. And to me, that's a true measure of who you were as a human being.
It's just like Jay Bilas said, Bill Walton, it feels strange and bad to say, was one of one.
Again, our breaking news today on SportsCenter, we have said goodbye to basketball legend Bill Walton. Passes away at the age of 71. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family as we say goodbye to Bill Walton.